This is Transqat, a safe space to stand. Transgender issues, queer people, respectful conversations. I'm host Clare McCarthy. Welcome to Transqat. Welcome back to Transqat, Authentic Selves, Celebrating Trans and Non-Binary People and Their Families, is a 2023 publication by Skinner House Books. It's nearly 400 pages of testimony by a wide array of gender-expansive folks, accompanied by beautiful photography. Today, you'll be meeting Peggy Gillespie, the editor. Peggy kindly arranged to have 3 of the people featured in the book join us. So, you'll also be meeting Fresh Lev White, Genny Beemyn, and Brianna Harris. Enjoy the conversation.
I didn't meet Barbara Walters. Barbara Walters came here long ago and then did a whole segment or something on one of her shows about Northampton, where I live, being Lesbianville. But the other interesting piece about Barbara Walters is she was the one who interviewed Jazz Jennings, who wrote the one of the forwards of the book, Authentic Selves. And Jazz was like, I don't know, 5 or 6 or something years old, and had transitioned already to being her authentic self. And that family is still going strong. They have TV, they've had a TV show. Jazz is about to graduate from Harvard this semester and is a super activist, as are all the people in her family. I just, stay in touch with her mom, basically. So Barbara has a melding influence.
Well, Peggy, let's start with you. This is your project. Tell us who you are and how you came to it.
Okay, well, I would say it's all of our projects, everybody in this the room here. About 35 years ago when I was young, we started Family Diversity Projects, which is a nonprofit, and we've created 8 different exhibits. And one of them, the early one of them was Love Makes a Family, Portraits of LGBT people and their families. It became like a coffee table book, but the exhibit is still traveling right now. It caused a huge controversy in Amherst, a very liberal progressive town where the elementary schools did not want to show it. It was going to teach their kids about sex, they said. People marched on the superintendent's office, and a parent group was formed, and a gay straight alliance was formed, and went to federal court, and we won, or the schools won. And Love Makes a Family was shown in all the elementary schools, and it got publicity. So then people started asking for it. And that's how the traveling exhibit kind of started. And Authentic Selves was the last one that I did during COVID, in terms of writing the book proposal and then finding these wonderful people you're seeing here and a lot more. And the reason I did it then is all our exhibits stopped traveling. And we had an earlier one called Pioneering Voices on Trans People, but it had really gotten completely outdated. So I started all again, and through the networking I don't know how I found all of like Genny and Lev and Brianna, but I count them all as my friends now and colleagues, and really love them from my interviews with them. A lot of the interviews were done on Zoom, and photographers were sent, like we found them all over the country. We actually photographed Genny and Brianna and family because they were close enough by. And there are about 40 families either in the book and or the exhibit, which, as I said, right now, 5 copies are crisscrossing the nation everywhere.
And that's something that makes this book, and I imagine the exhibit as well, unique and really beautiful, is the voices of family members. Each one of the individuals, one of the gender expansive folks, gets their say, but then family members get their say as well. And that's something that very often is missed in coming out stories, right? Is you get that one person's frame of reference. And,
also we really define family in as broad a possible way, including obviously chosen family and friends are family. They are my family. When you see, I'll show you the cover, like this is a mom with her daughter who's a trans woman. This is an old friend of mine who's a great cinematographer with her wife and baby. Ava is non-binary. This is a local family they were born, signed I guess there were four sons, and then Angel came out as a trans woman. This is their mom who uses they them pronouns. So it's it's and then there's well who you are no longer a partner with this person, but I assume perhaps hopefully friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we just, and I don't have Brianna, maybe you can show your picture.
I'm Brianna Harris. I am 64 years old. I live in southern Vermont. I transitioned 20 years ago this year. I went full time. I started transition about a year before that, but made it all legal 20 years ago this year. I was involved in the Pioneering Voices project that Peggy mentioned. Up until about 5 years ago, that was still getting around as well, because I saw it over at Keene State College. I kind of knew of family diversity projects and all that through that project, which was spearheaded by Jack Pearson, who at the time was at Smith College, and was working with Peggy to put the project together. Just as a little background, I mean, like so many of us, I knew at a very young age that something was different about me. And I guess it was first grade I first really became aware that something was not quite right, that I was supposed to be a boy, but didn't really fit in with the boys. I was a sensitive kid. I cried easily and leaned more towards the feminine type stuff, but I didn't fit in with the girls because I was a boy. Dealt with that, a lot of harassment and such for years, and around fourth grade, I decided that I needed to prove myself to be the best boy I could be, and sports was my route for doing that. So I became an athlete, wrestled, played football, baseball, eventually ice hockey, all the good macho sports. And that bought off a lot of the harassment, and I became part of the jock crowd. So I was in with the cool kids. I followed that route, and like many of us, I kept trying to find that thing that was going to make the feelings that I was experiencing go away. And when I was about 11, I was compelled to cross-dress. I got into my mom's clothes, and things felt very right. I continued to cross-dress for pretty much until I transitioned secretly and kept what I was feeling to myself. And went through the steps of marriage and I have a 28-year-old son who came out to us about 2 years ago as non-binary. They're also in the book. So ended up transitioning, coming out full time, and actively pursuing transition in 2005. 2011, to kind of make it shorten up here, I met Amy, who is the other part of the family in the book, and we have been together ever since. We brought her two kids into my home. We settled in my home, and we've just become a family, almost like everybody else's. And Amy and I ended up making it official, making it legal in 2020. Just celebrated our 5th anniversary on Election Day, because back in 2020 we got married on Election Day, because regardless of how that election went, we wanted to have something good to remember that day for.
The passages in your chapter, when you talk about Aiden and the interaction, are very, very powerful. And I want to hear from some of the others, but I'm hoping we get to come back to that. Genny, Lev, how early did you start wrestling or dealing with these feelings?
It was very different for me as somebody who is non-binary. And that language didn't even exist until the late 1990s. So growing up, even when I got to college and learned about trans people, it was trans women, trans men. And even though I was not comfortable with the gender I had been assigned, I knew that I didn't feel like a woman. I didn't really have a desire to transition, especially since all the trans women I knew back in the 1980s were almost like drag queens, big hair, big boobs. And like, that's just not my idea of womanhood. And so I didn't really see myself reflected in them. And it wasn't until the late 90s when the word genderqueer started being used online in the way that we use it today that I said, oh, there's a possibility between and outside of male and female, man and woman. There's a place that I could call home and find community, or at least find a place for myself. Took years and years to actually find community, because even when I started identifying as genderqueer back around the turn of the century, publicly, I didn't know anyone else. There was no other people that I can personally know. It wasn't until years later that I started meeting people, and then they were my students. And so very much not the kind of folks I'm going to hang around with and have as friends. And so it took a while before non-binary people started to become more visible and getting to know. And of course, now it's like non-binary people are the vast majority of younger people. So it's just been a total sea shift in the last 20 or so years, where non-binary was just invisible and no one really identified as non-binary, to now where that's the largest part of the trans non-binary community, at least among younger folk.
In terms of when I hit Pride events, I see that with the kids that I talk to, that they are so comfortable with some variation of a non-binary term. And it's wonderful to see, because as you say, that when we were growing up, that wasn't something that was offered. That wasn't on the menu.
Yeah, I've done work with the Common App, which is the admission form that's used by more than 1,000 colleges, and more than 1 million students fill it out. And I was able to get them to eventually got a question asking gender identity, and I had the luxury to analyze that data for several years. And each year, more than 100 different gender identities people named for themselves. Just really incredible.
Genny is a noted scholar on all these issues, has written many books, and is the head of the Stonewall Center at University of Massachusetts.
As a graduate of the master's program there, I speak highly of UMass. Go Minutemen. Genny, also the co-author of Lives of Transgender People. Lev, your chapter also starts with some early experiences that echoed some of what Bree was saying. There were a lot of expectations on you that didn't fit.
Right. Yes, and trying to figure out where I fit in different identities, for sure. And I'm one of the few people in the book who's picture alone.
Right.
Which is kind of sad, but at the time I had a fairly new partner and wasn't sure if it was going to, I thought it was going to work out and really wanted to work out, and thankfully it has, and we've been together now 5+ years. But at the time I wasn't sure if I wanted to put them through this.
Lev, I am proud to get to talk to you, because you are the only person I've ever met, now that I've met you, who's been booted out of Girl Scouts for grand theft pretzel, I believe.
It was easy because I really liked the pretzels. I still love the pretzels, even though I'm gluten-free. But it's interesting, when I was thinking, as I was listening to everybody share about how early childhood trauma impacted how I showed up in the world. And what I mean by that is that I didn't get all the social cues So I played boy to my, I played like I'm brother, sister to my younger sister, and sort of pursued what we call non-binary or gender expansive like existence for a really long time. Whenever I could, I did have my unfortunately my adopted mom died when I was 11, but prior to that, there was clothing that I had to wear, that I would come home with the skirt muddied up because I also played football, or whatever we played with the guys. And also what's coming up is just this memory about how I would get chased home after school by like all the girls, like in elementary school, and it took me a long time to realize that I think a lot of them may have had a crush on me. But because I had assumed this boyish role, I never fought with girls. I just sort of assumed that role, where with boys, I'd get into scuffles, but I would never consider hitting a girl. I was really early queer as well. There was someone, I don't want to name them, but I did kiss a non-family member. But I did kiss a girl when I was really young, and it was literally like the no movement, right? Just the lips on each other, right? Because you don't know what you're doing. But that attraction came on really early to other females. And then I came out at 15, and I'll jump way forward to my 30s when I woke up one day in San Francisco. So New York, um, suburban New York, New York City, DC, San Francisco. And I remember waking up in San Francisco in my perfect outfit and looking in the mirror and going, oh yeah, you look great. And this is like, just like, subconsciously, like this is really working, but you're not a man came up. And I put that away because of my sort of like, my commitments to being butch,
Yeah.
which, still is an identify I live within or lives within me. And then jumping forward again at 38, when someone asked me if I was trans, and I was, even just more masculine at the time. I was also somebody who worked out and was really fit. And so passing as male. And I had been so into different worlds that I missed what was happening in the trans community. And I was like, of course I'm not trans because I only knew of trans women and I only knew of their struggles. And I thought it was not okay. I was like, this is not okay, everybody calling yourselves trans, right? And I had to do my own learning and waking up. And then by 38 is when I transitioned. Um, and then, yeah, my family is chosen family. And unfortunately, I'm not with the woman who I was with in the photo. And, that you live with that, things change. Oh, I can also say that one of the things I've really appreciated when I transitioned, everybody was asking me to talk. And I was like, I didn't transition to become a spokesperson. Like, this is not what I want to do. And of
Hmm.
course, now I'm in all these anthologies and I do trans ally trainings, and I'm really grateful that I have the skills and the privilege to be able to um, support people to opening their minds up to other ways of being, um, or if not, expanding our humanity beyond the social constructs. There's youth in my community, and that's me when I graduated a class at Spirit Rock Meditation Center. And I just did a workshop with a group in Saskatchewan. This is the first first trans and gender ally work I've done all year, again, because of the conditions, the political conditions.
And you've been a Buddhist teacher too, a mindfulness teacher.
I'm a teacher, yeah. Shyly, I do my best.
If each of the three of you could talk a little bit about what it is you do for a living, what's your workplace like, and what's it like to be trans in the industry, the business that you're working in?
I moved to Vermont back in 1984, fresh out of college. Had to do an internship, so I figured why not the ski industry? I was a Parks and Recreation major at Slippery Rock University in Pennsylvania, and So off I went to Vermont. I worked at Smuggler's Notch for a winter, and the following spring, I ended up moving down to Mount Snow and building chairlifts for a summer. I've pretty much been there ever since, with the exception of a 3-year stint in the late 80s. Since returning to Vermont in 1990, I've worked ever since at Mount Snow and transitioned on the job at Mount Snow. And I came out to them in 2005 and transitioned on the job there. And I am thankful every day that I live where I do, because there is this bubble of safety where in my case in southern Vermont, most of Vermont is a bit of a bubble, and particularly where I am and my wife and I and our family is. I mean, yeah, there's pockets of Trumpers and things like that, but for the most part, everybody is pretty much live and let live. And interestingly enough, little anecdote from when I first came out to the company, I had started to transition at the time and started to grow my hair out. I like to joke with people about how when in college I was very much into the Tom Selleck Magnum PI look. I had the short tennis shorts and the mustache. There was a fairly strong resemblance there. When I started to transition, I started growing my hair out, plucking my eyebrows, making some minor changes here and there without actually like fully coming out to the community and such. And one of my coworkers who was working in HR started to hear people talking. And one day I happened to be up in the HR office, and she motioned me over and said, "I'm hearing people talking about you, and a lot of it isn't very nice." And so it was right about the time where I was trying to figure out how I was going to come out at work. Work was my last hurdle. And so it was like, okay, the door just opened, and we went into her office, and I told her what was going on. At the time, our company was owned by the American Ski Company, who owned 9 resorts nationwide from between California and Maine. And I was the first person that had ever transitioned in the company. And so I explained to her what was going to happen and such, and she called our corporate office, which happened to be in Salt Lake City of all places, and our HR director was a Mormon. So that was all kind of like, okay, how's this going to go? And to their credit, they were like, well, this person has been a good employee for 15 years with the company, and just have them keep us apprised of what is going on and what to expect next and such. So it was really interesting to see how this company that was based in Mormon land dealt with the situation. Nobody ever asked me, well, what bathroom are you going to use? They just assumed that, okay, you're going to use the ladies' room from now on. And so I came out in the company, came out to my work crew. I was working on the golf course for the summer up there. I worked as a ski technician in the wintertime at the ski resort. And people were really amazing about it. People asked a lot of questions. And one of the things, like Lev was saying, that they didn't intend to become a public speaker, or an advocate and an activist. But in my case, when I came out, I consciously decided that there was no more hiding. I was not going to hide from who I am anymore. I'd hidden at that point, it was 42 years.
2005, of course, is 9 years before Time Magazine declares the transgender tipping point, right? So this is not part of the public conversation. It would it would not be unusual that your HR director would need to check with headquarters because there wouldn't be policy manuals in place yet.
No, there was nothing.
You may know this, Bree, but
Yep.
Vermont is the only state in the country that has not had an anti-trans bill introduced this year. There have been more than 1,000 bills introduced in 49 states, but Vermont's been the only one to escape that. So
Yep.
kudos to you all.
When Trump first took office, Vermont publicly came out and said, we are not abandoning the transgender, the LGBT, and particularly the trans community, despite the attacks. They made a public statement and said that they were going to stand by their transgender protections come hell or high water. So, yeah.
And that's with a Republican governor as well.
This episode of Transqat is sponsored by Prism Counseling and Support, LLC. Prism is a counseling practice in Killingworth, Connecticut for the LGBTQ+ community. They offer individual, group, couples, and family therapy services. At Prism, clients of all ages are welcome for in-person and virtual sessions. Most insurance is accepted. What makes Prism unique is that they offer much more than just mental health services. Their mission is to support, advocate, foster community, and educate. So here you'll find skill-building workshops, community events, field trips, and professional development workshops for organizations. You can visit Prism on the web at prismcounselingct.com. That's prismcounselingct.com. Just one L in counseling. Or you can email Devin, Devin, at prismcounselingct.com to make an appointment. And don't miss the second annual Prism Out Loud, a big gay cabaret, March 6th and 7th at Chester Meeting House. Tickets go on sale soon, so keep an eye on the website or follow them, Prism Counseling CT, on Facebook.
Going in my situation is, as Peggy mentioned, I direct the LGBTQIA+ Center at UMass and have done so for almost 20 years now. So I'm fortunate in that being trans is an asset to my job. Few people, I think, can probably say that. I do a lot of research and writing and speaking on trans issues. I wrote some of the first articles 25 years ago on trans college students and continue to do so because the education still needs to happen and the research still needs to happen, especially around non-binary students. I did the first national study of non-binary students about 10 years ago, which I found it hard to believe that that was the first, but research, I found it was the first. No one else could say they'd done that. So, but of course, in this environment, even in a place like Massachusetts, it's really difficult. I wonder every day whether we're going to be shut down. Not because the university is not supportive, not because the state is not supportive, but I worry about what sort of way the administration is going to force universities to close down race-based centers and LGBTQIA+ centers, either threatening federal funding or threatening state funding. Public university, right now, by my count, 33 LGBTQ+ centers around the country have been shut down. Including Harvard, which you would not think like Harvard, right? Massachusetts, the school with the most money, up the wazoo, caved and shut down their center. So every day I worry about just like what's going to happen to us. What kind of
that's in a state with Governor Healy,
Yeah, as being governor.
I've got to imagine, Genny, that your job is this balance of what right now is incredibly stressful, the stuff you just described, stressful and depressing, but then you're also working with queer youth, which in my experience is just a ray of light in this cesspool we're living in, where you can sometimes see the future.
I've been doing this work for 25 plus years now, and it's because of the students, both because I want to be supporting students and making sure they have a better experience than I did growing up and when I was in college, but also because the students sustain me. I wouldn't be doing this work if I didn't really have the support of our amazing student staff and getting the chance to work with them and really feeling blessed to be working with some really wonderful student folks.
I think I want to begin by just thanking Genny for the work that they're doing. And I'm so glad, that it's still happening, that it sounds like it's even thriving, and of course, Peggy, who's got the 35-year-old project still going, and Authentic Selves still going. And just, in some way, just want to highlight that we're not going to stop. Like there's this movement is forever, and just hoping that some people can turn towards that sometimes, because there's so much depression and victimhood happening. And I think it's our responsibility to look, lack of a better term, towards the light. And so when I first started coming out in a super progressive nonprofit, I had my physical transition before my medical transition, like 10 years apart. And I remember the super, liberal organization at minimum, we had access to 12 bathrooms because we were that size of an organization, definitely more bathrooms than we needed. And the struggle to get any, any bathroom to be gender neutral was a struggle. And then, of course, they wanted to use the women's room, which was right, because women are already oppressed. Let's let them deal with it. And because I was, transmasculine, and then I guess I'll go to Otherwise, I worked at an LGBTQ center after that, so it was a little different. And even there, you dealt with people who were internally unhappy, being transphobic towards other people in the community, which is, how that is, hurt people, like when you're not loving yourself, how you can. So, unfortunately, transphobia happens within the community as well as outside of it. And I've been working independently since 2017. And I believe it was Genny had mentioned earlier, a lot of my business has been knocked out. And I'm now considering, because I do different forms of trainings, mindful self-compassion in the work, or not mindful, but wise self-compassion in the workplace being one of them. Do I hide my transgender work in order to eat and pay rent? And that's a big question. I'm really considering, do I make 2 separate websites? Because I can bring it in, it's going to come with me wherever I go, but I have to work. I just want to talk about how when I moved to DC in the 80s, I met groups of people of color where some of us identified as Two-Spirit. And it was a thing that we could do in that area. I know it's different in many areas. Not all Indigenous people want people outside of the immediate community using that term. But there was non-binary happening with different terminology. And, having a talk with Susan Stryker, who you might know.
Oh, yes. Historian.
It's just, the challenge of getting BIPOC stories, because there wasn't access to video, there wasn't access to writing, there just wasn't so much access. So I'm looking forward to hearing more of sort of what was going on in those communities beyond what I already know.
Peggy, this is a really substantive project.
I think there in the book are 35 families, only because it got to be 400 pages and I had to fight as many. But there's about maybe another 5, 6, 7 that were not able to be put in the book just because of space, and they're all in the exhibit, and which is very important to me, that everybody that I interviewed, there were only 2 people that, one particularly a PFLAG leader down south, and her trans son, they had to pull their picture, not from the book, but from the exhibit, just because of danger where they live.
How did you go about outreach?
over having done this for so many years, like, with the Love Makes a Family, we did one on LGBT people of faith, on one called Building Bridges, Portraits of Immigrants and Refugees, and we were able to get a bunch of LGBTQ asylum seekers through a organization in Worcester at a church. There's an asylum project. I've learned to just network, and let's say if I were meeting Lev, because I read about him in some Buddhist thing, that there was a Buddhist trans teacher, then I think I wrote to you, that's my memory. And then I might say, do you know anybody else out there in San Francisco?
Right.
And that's been the process, particularly again, because it was COVID, we couldn't travel. So people helped us not only find photographers, but also other people. And then there was this wonderful photographer, Robin Rain. Robin is in Atlanta and found about 12 of the people that are in the exhibit and book in the whole Georgia area, because I would say, we really need a family with kids, or this is what we're lacking. We haven't found a native family right now, or something like that. And then somebody would know somebody out in Montana. And then we found Rhett Bolin, who lives on a reservation, was a teenager, and his family was trans man. And it just kept, the problem was finding too many. And even now, like, I'll meet people and I go, oh no, we have to do a whole book. I mean, the stories, of course, especially now reflecting what's going on around in our government, our horrifying government. People are becoming refugees. Trans people are having to move out of their states to places like Vermont and Massachusetts as well. We have a few living here in Northampton that I know of. But the main thing that I work on after the book got published was creating the exhibit. And like I told you, Claire, before we started taping, that we made 5 copies of the exhibit that are traveling all over the country, and they go to public libraries, schools, private schools, even some public schools, charter schools, many, many houses of worship. One copy of Authentic Selves, believe it or not, was at the El Paso Museum of History for, I think, 2 months. Didn't even get anybody protesting. There, Iowa, a little tiny public library in Iowa, where there was a mom of a trans kid who was a librarian, and they've just brought our Love Makes a Family there too. And it's just, I don't know exactly how it all happens, but anybody listening to this, we love to get our exhibits to wherever you are, and it's not hard to do. We never turn anybody away based on finances. So, that little church in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, if they can't even afford the shipping cost, we need the funds. We're a small nonprofit, but then that corporation just gave us $5,000. A PFLAG group in Missouri gave us $6,000. Another church only had $200. Somebody else says we have nothing. So we never turn anybody away, because the stories and as we say, combating, I don't like that language, but challenging hatred with love is what we're on. And I'll just go back to your question about Barbara Walters, is I don't think I made it through one interview without crying. And not crying, like, not just the negative stuff that I would hear, but I would talk to people's mothers who hadn't accepted their trans kids, and then they had come to a place of, this is the kid I gave birth to. This is my beloved child. And, many of them religious, and this is a child of God. And they had moved through prejudice and we call it ignorance, just not knowing, to acceptance and love. And that touches my heart anytime that I hear it.
The book is remarkable in terms of the diversity within the diversity. You have chosen to share with us people of different ages, and urban versus rural, and ethnicities, and people of color, of different nationalities. It's every chapter is just this new insight into a community that maybe you haven't had any contact with before. And one of the other axes that comes into play is celebrity's the wrong word, but you have people who are known quantities in this book. You have Sarah McBride. You have the introduction by Jazz Jennings. I was so delighted that you had Joy Layden in this book. Joy was on the show last season, and I think we both ended up in tears by the end of it. It was one of the most profound conversations I've ever had.
It was the first openly trans woman to teach at an Orthodox university yeshiva in New York City. I mean, as a poet, an author, and an activist as well.
I'm assuming at this point that not only are you in the book, but you have read the book. Am I wrong about that for anybody? All right. Well, then my question is, I'd like each of you to tell me about your favorite chapter that isn't you. You don't get to talk about yourself.
Well, I'm at a disadvantage and I don't have the book right with me, so I can't like skim through and look at. But what was wonderful is I knew a bunch of folks in the book, friends of mine, acquaintances, some colleagues, some of whom I suggested that they do the project. But still reading what they said about themselves and about their histories, I learned a lot more about people that I already knew. I'm thinking particularly of like Ty Power, who was a dear friend who I've worked with for many years, and got to learn a lot more about his family and his experiences, and that was really wonderful.
Let me throw an extra question into the mix. Did you see recurring themes that you thought were important to highlight?
The importance of chosen family, I would say.
Yeah.
There's Ty and his partner. Yeah, the importance of chosen family, because for so many of us, biological family is not there for us, is not super supportive. Although certainly there are plenty of folks in the book, families, biological families, where the parents have trans non-binary kids and they're wonderful, really supportive, or sometimes the parents are trans and non-binary and their kids are supportive of them. But for a lot of us, we don't have that luxury.
I mean, not to make the rest of you feel bad, but one of my favorite families, because I got to meet them several times, is Brianna and Amy and the kids. We had so much fun up there at your farmhouse, and the dog, and but it was, what was so unique was, it's two trans women met because of their kids. As I remember, your son Aiden had written a piece for the school newspaper about having a trans mom, because and wanting to educate other kids. He was just, well, maybe it was middle school.
He was eighth grade at the time.
Yeah, yep. And then Amy's daughter was coming up, was a little younger, and the teacher said, and was transitioning also. And then the teacher, I think, said, oh, maybe you should have the kids talk, or why don't you talk to Brianna?
Yeah, it was Amy's son who was in third grade at the time, and Amy was kind of getting to that point where she was preparing for surgery and such, and the school counselor connected Amy and I, and over our kids, my son helping her son get through her transition.
Right, and they just happened to fall in love and get married. And
yep, the rest, as they say, is history.
Right. And it was like their house is filled with, like, one of the pictures, I don't think it didn't make it into the book, but one of my favorite ones was your refrigerator with every possible slogan and butterflies everywhere, and it was just a kind of a beautiful Vermont farmhouse. But it was the love in that family. I think, like going into actually somebody's house, Aiden was there that first time, and then we invited the other kids to come and talk, and the love between the kids, the siblings, it didn't feel step sibling-ish. It felt sibling, like that was, not that everything I'm sure is perfect in any sibling.
No, but very, very much so. They are just brothers and sisters. And
yeah. And there's just love. And every time I bump into Brianna and Amy, it's speaking out at at the Northampton Pride, or we meet up to like exchange flyers and such. It's been like a warm friendship.
I welcome an opportunity to go back to Vermont. I've only been there once, so One of the most beautiful. It's one of the places I've considered running to for climate change.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of BIPOC people there, but the people that I've met have been gorgeous. So I was gonna say, like Genny, I had to actually look who's in the book, only because I've been in a few books since then. I'm like, who's in what? So being able to look at, I read most of Lewis Mitchell's and Kyla Brodicus and D'Lo because I know them, but I have a favorite. It's the couple in North Carolina and the work that they have done and continue to do. I can't remember their names, but I think that's one of my favorite stories. And maybe because I've connected with them online more often than some.
Run a medical clinic, physician's associate, and his wife is Tamara. That's
Yeah, who's like
Hey,
just brilliant brilliant at bringing in allies in the work that they do.
Joseph Burwell and Tamara Burns, and they started a clinic for basically for a lot for trans refugees down in. They were living in I believe it was Arizona or New Mexico. I'm forgetting right the second. I'd have to look at it. And it was called Peaceworks, and they were the head. And she met him. Her son is trans. Yeah, she was a advocate, and then wound up falling in love with Joseph. And then they were helping so many people who were trans coming across the border to have a safe haven and medical care, which was really, really, as you can imagine, getting more and more crucial. But they moved to North Carolina. Seems to me they've been on many panels in person. I've met them too in New York City, but they moved there because of family and have continued the kind of work in both in healthcare and in support and creating networks for trans people.
So for me, like Genny, it was interesting. I mean, I've known Genny for 20 years, primarily through their work with the Stonewall Center. I was involved in the Stonewall Center Speakers Bureau many, many years back, and Genny was running the show then. And like Ty Power and Lewis Mitchell and a lot of those people that I am fortunate to call friends. I learned a lot more about those people. I got a lot of insight into those people, but I think one of the ones that really stands out to me is Angel and Hal Castro, because I've been on a couple of panels with her, and I've gotten to know her a little bit through the panels and such, and she's just always seems to be happy to be here. She's proud of who she is, and she's young, and she's got that energy, and she's just a wonderful person, and I've really enjoyed getting to know her and read her story and such. So I would say that would probably be one of my favorites, just because of my personal interaction with her and getting to know her.
it's a rough time to be gender expansive. I was just this week reading about the swimmer
Leah Middlebury.
Yeah, and just heartbroken. And as Genny was describing, 1,000 different bills against us, and I thought, it can be a dark time. And what I'd like to leave with is a message of hope, a message of community from each of you to the folks who are struggling out there. But before we do that, Peggy, how can people get the book? How can they get in touch with you in terms of the exhibits and maybe bringing it to their neighborhood?
Well, the easiest thing is to go to our website, which is Family Diversity Projects with an S.org. So all together, FamilyDiversityProjects.org. And there, if you write to somebody, because we're very small, you'll write directly to me. Then I will answer your query and, set up a Zoom or, do whatever you need. And as far as the book goes, one thing I tell people is tell your library to get a copy, because if you ask for a copy, they have to apparently order copies, and same with even college or schools, maybe. I'm not sure if that rule applies. You can order it from Goodreads or from local independent bookstores, which I support the most, of course. Amazon happens to be selling it very cheaply right this minute. They did a sale. Encourage people. And the other thing, if you go to Amazon, and maybe some of the others, they have a different cover on the book, but it's the same book. It's the reason they did it was the publisher worried about the people on the cover, just AI and all kinds of things. I wasn't particularly, I asked everybody, if it was okay to stay on the cover, and nobody had any problem with it. But the Skinner House books, out of a lot of caution, but they did that to protect people. And so if you go into Amazon or maybe Goodreads, I'm not sure, they'll see an abstract painting or something with the book, same book. But I say ask your independent bookstores, tell them to get it. Right. We tell people also buy copies of the book and send them to your legislators. And it's not just sending them to the for the MAGA kind of people, but it's sending them to people that are supporting and can help pass the word on, or medical clinics. Give a copy to your doctor's office. A lot of people have said, "Oh, I went to my doctor's office. They had it in the waiting room." So it's kind of a showing to trans people we're an ally.
I'm working on a show for later in the season with the J.S. Bryant School out in the Berkshire.
Well, they just had our exhibit. They just had.
Did they show it? Because when I for an event, oh gosh, in the summer, and they had a couple of copies on the tables in what's going to be their cafeteria.
I spoke to them at a couple of different prides this summer, and they very quickly picked up the book. Amy, I was just going to tell Peggy that Amy just bought 3 copies for their library there at the school. We were out at the school there for their opening ceremonies and such, and the exhibit was on display there, and that's just a wonderful project out there.
So then, parting words. How do we get ourselves through this?
About 10 years ago, I wrote a piece called "Why Trans Rights Nationally Are Only a Matter of Time." And this had been right after the same-sex marriage ruling. And I used that history and applied it to trans rights, because within a very short period of time, unprecedented short period of time, less than 10 years, same-sex marriage had just totally reversed, where you had vast majority of people opposed to it to the vast majority of people being supportive of it. And what happened was demographics. Young people overwhelmingly supportive of same-sex marriage, older people being very much opposed, and they're dying off. So it was only a matter of time before there was going to be that reversal. So, it was going to take some time. You saw all the constitutional amendments, all the state laws that were banning same-sex marriage and recognizing same-sex marriage from other states, all gets washed away because of just the level of support changed. And I made the argument the same thing is going to happen with trans rights. It wasn't going to be pretty. We were going to see a whole bunch of really hateful laws, and I never would have expected quite as many hateful laws and just how trans and non-binary people are being targeted today. But I knew this was coming, but I still have hope that in the end we're going to see trans and non-binary rights be universal in this country, because young people overwhelmingly support trans and non-binary rights. If they're not trans and non-binary themselves, and the older people who have the power are dying off. So they're going to lose. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, it's a really frightening time to be transgender or any kind of gender variant. 20 years ago, I took up the fight, like I said earlier. I mean, I consciously made the decision that nobody was pushing me back into a closet 20 years ago, and that I would speak out, I would use my voice, which was terrifying for me. As a kid, I hated public speaking, but as an out transgender person, I found my voice. And I decided that back then I like to use this little, I decided that I have a big mouth and I'm not afraid to use it. And, and so I had, to that end, I mean, I got involved in the Speakers Bureau and things like that, and have spoken out all over New England, spoken to on panels and such all over New England. And for me, my strength is being out and being proud and taking every opportunity I get. I mean, Peggy will tell you that all she's got to do is send me a text or an email and say, hey, I need panel people for such and such, and I'm there. And that has become my power, is speaking my truth. This is not a time to be timid. It's not a time that we can shy away from being out. Yes, it's dangerous, and so many parts of the country. Like I've said before, Vermont is a safe space, but I'm not afraid to travel beyond my bubble. And I actually take a lot of joy in that these days. I mean, despite everything that's going on. I invited, and as part of that, I invited people to speak to me or speak to trans people and get to know us, because that is so important right now. And Jenny Boylan said in her book that her grandmother at one point said it's impossible to hate someone whose story you know. That has become my power in these difficult times, is speaking out whenever I get the chance and telling my story and just being authentic.
Yeah, I want to bring in that these attacks against trans and gender expansive people, it's one of the most horrible distractions of our time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not our fault. We're a very small segment of community. We are not impacting your dollar, your life, like housing and all the things that people are suffering under. It's not trans people. And so for speaking directly to trans people, just remembering it's not our fault and that community is everything. Please look at your history. If you look at history, all you will see is the gorgeous trajectory of where we are now. We've never been this visible, which means we've never had this many allies, which, sort of builds on what Genny and Bree said. It's like, there's no way we can't come out of this whole everything that we're in as, I don't know, in some way, again, leaders of models of what it's like to be human and share your full expression of yourself. And so in this togetherness, please also take the time, look at your prejudices and do the work, because together is how we make it, not pointing towards each other. Lateral oppression, we don't have space for that anymore. So just engaging in different communities, trans and non-binary communities that are not yours. And there's so much music and art and other talents. So yeah, remember to look towards the light, look for the joy, participate in joy because you deserve it.
Beautiful. Peggy, we started with you. Let's end with you.
I appreciate what everybody has said about hope, because without hope, there's just despair. And, it's very easy to turn on the news and feel just each day like, no, or why? Like by now I thought all my exhibits and books would be obsolete. But the fact is, that things, not everybody can be a speak out person, because a lot of young people, they might lose their home or their, but to find, whether it's online or to find some ally, somebody, whether it's at school, a counselor, that can give you that personal hope, and reading stories or getting to know other people. For me, it's about hope. Can be kind of funny, where if you're attached, it has to be a certain way. It can cause you some suffering. But if instead you can embrace that there's been so much suffering in the world right now, and danger. I mean, like the BIPOC community, particularly trans women, are the most attacked group, people to experience violence. So you understand when people have to hide, or find their, their little communities, because it is a scary time. But no, not just that it gets better, that was a movement before. It can very well, but it may take a while. But know that, as they say, the arc of history points towards justice. That's my hope. And I just, it's like find one friend, one ally, start there, and then build that little, it's like building a little fire, and light, it gets lighter, and then gradually put a little kindling, and good, not in the bad way, but in the good way of creating a bonfire of community, whether it's people we know or people on the internet or people all over the world. We're all struggling in different ways, to bring this world into a more peaceful place right now, and get rid of we had some hope the other day with the election, like California. We had those one woman in Virginia fought against, she said 90% of the ads down there were anti-trans ads.
Yeah.
She won, against that. So people, I think, are getting a little like, come on, we want our food to be cheaper.
A lot of people are coming to the realization that this is not what they voted for.
Yeah.
So I have hope that we're going to get rid of, at some point, there's a lot of damage, but let's hold, we're all in it together, those of us in this room, and those of us hopefully who are listening can join the hands of somebody else, and we keep this path brighter and go towards the light.
This is Sadie McCarthy. I'm Claire's niece.
And you've just been listening to Transqat. It is made by one of my favorite people in the world, Clare McCarthy.
Transqat is a production of Transqat Enterprises, LLC.
Copyright 2023, all rights reserved.
Join us on the web at transqat.com.
That's TRANSQAT.com.
QAT.com.
QAT.com.
There you'll find links to Transqat, the blog,
writing projects,
speaking engagements,
and our PayPal donations page.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monkeys.
Monies.
Your monies. Your monies.
Not monkeys.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monies. Any monkeys will be gratefully received as well.
Follow Transqat on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
On TikTok, we are at The Real Transqat.
Want to tell your story on air?
Or ask Claire a question?
What is the deal?
She has all the answers.
Or suggest a guest or topic for an upcoming episode.
Use the contact page at the website
or email her directly at crmtranscat@gmail.com.
crmtranscat@gmail.com.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.